Welcome to the Coherent Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Jemima House. Today I want to speak about the shape of leadership and transitioning from pyramid to circle, which is really my whole body of work. The shape of leadership sits underneath performance, underneath culture, engagement, and everything else that a company chooses to measure. I want to look at the shape because the shape determines a lot more than we tend to acknowledge. Most organisations are still operating within a pyramid structure. It's been the accepted structure for a very long time. It's familiar. There's an effortless clarity around it because it's so well known. So it does allow strategic decisions to be centralised and to kind of cascade down. It does work on lots of levels. However, the way that we live today does not dovetail with the pyramid shape of leadership. The conditions that organisations are now operating within, because organisations are made up of people, right, have changed significantly. The markets move faster, talent expectations are different, information flows differently, more horizontally in society. And the external environments are different too. But this internal architecture has stayed the same for so long. And what's happening, if you look across the board, is there's this tension that has started to build. If you think square peg round hole, you're kind of getting there. So if you're leading at CEO or maybe COO level, the pyramid places you at the apex, at the top. Strategic direction sits with you. Accountability to investors or boards sits with you. And the risk concentration sits with you as well. So you're expected to hold the long-term vision at the same time as responding to short-term volatility. And from that space, you can see things that others can't see. However, you still have to pass down actions to the levels that are below you because you can't do everything. And coming back up, the information reaches you, but it's through multiple layers. So even in really well-run companies, the information arrives interpreted, condensed, maybe a little bit Chinese whispersy. And that's how hierarchical systems function. But it does create a distance between decision and daily impact. And the layers beneath you are having a different experience to you. Senior leaders translate strategy into operational movement. They hold the targets and human response. Absorb ambiguity and resistance or confusion. So they're dealing with stuff from up top and below them. And over time, those layers in the middle, those people, those leaders in the middle, they become really highly skilled at stretching across competing pressures. And now you might only become aware of the stretch when it gets too much, when the rubber band has stretched too far and it snaps, i.e. people leave. So every single layer of the pyramid adapts to the position it occupies because it has to. Executives learn to decide quickly, and they also learn how to buffer and translate, because there are many, many people, many teams, and it's a necessity of the position. But from the inside, it feels like effort. And it feels like this is hard. When you start to shift perspective slightly and look at the architecture rather than the individuals, you can see how it's the shape of the leadership and how the authority and responsibility is distributed that is actually the problem. And if you are a systems thinker, like I am, you get to notice the patterns. They become really predictable. So not only is it difficult for people in the middle layer who are absorbing stuff they have to action from the top, and confusion or difficulty from the layers below them, but for every layer, even executives at the very top can feel isolated because they're removed from the impact of their decisions. Senior leaders can start to feel a bit compressed because they're holding expectations from multiple directions. Teams can easily feel disengaged because they feel like they don't have any influence, even though they are essential to execution of what's being asked of them. Now, none of these experiences are personal failings at all. They speak to the shape of the leadership system itself. And without looking at the shape, then organisations have to fall back on behavioural solutions. Like, let's have a communication workshop. Let's have a resilience programme. Let's have another engagement initiative. And whilst those interventions might be valuable, they are a band-aid on a problem that has been caused by the underlying shape of the leadership system itself. So it's a temporary fix. The pressure patterns stay the same because the geometry of leadership itself remains intact. And this is where circular leadership becomes so relevant. A circular architecture, it doesn't remove authority or accountability, but it reorganizes relationship. We're in relationship to everything and everybody. We place ourselves in an understanding within relationship. So you don't lose that in a circular architecture. The roles stay defined. Strategic direction is still important. But what changes is the relational proximity between decision, responsibility, and consequence. So no longer are the consequence and the decision separated. Think about that for a second. What if the centre of the organisation became shared purpose rather than positional power. So around that centre sit clearly articulated roles that are in a dynamic relationship with each other. So dynamic means moving in this instance. It means when one thing shifts, the other thing shifts in response to it. It's a lot more human. If you think about how the human body works, it's very similar. It's self-adjusting. And for executive leaders, this is particularly significant. You stay accountable, you stay decisive, you stay strategically responsible, and access to the signal comes through to you earlier. The insights you get are deeper because the distance between intention and lived consequence gets smaller. For senior leaders, translation becomes more collaborative and less compressed. For teams, ownership aligns more closely with influence. So performance begins to stabilise effortlessly. And in my system, everything is organised around the central proposition of ease, which is the natural human default. So alignment improves across the board. Well-being improves because strain isn't concentrated in bottlenecks. So the core insight here is architectural. When authority, responsibility and proximity to impact are designed to sit closer together, the system requires a lot less compensatory effort from individuals. Leaders have to spend less energy buffering against consequences and more energy advancing meaningful work. This is so exciting to me. When you see leadership as architecture, you gain design agency. And that's the purpose of this episode, to offer you that shift in vantage point, to create enough distance from the familiar shape that you can examine it clearly and decide whether it still serves the organisation that you're in. If this way of thinking resonates with you, follow the podcast and you can get notified of every episode that I create. So each one is building on this foundation and deepening the conversation around coherent leadership. I'll be back here, same time next week. See you then.